Hello, everybody. Just give everybody a couple of minutes to join. Excellent. Well, I think we'll kick off. So thank you all for being available. Today, we're going to be talking about basically building AI capabilities using data, looking at the implications for that, and exploring solid data foundations and the difference that can make to your business. So I'm Nick Welch, CTO for Viditech. I'm going to be covering the AI side of the discussions today. I'm also joined by co-panelists Alan Konzak, Head of Data Engineering for our data partner, Optima Connect.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Pleasure to be here, and thank you for the invitation, Nick.
Very welcome. So a little bit before we get started, a little bit about us. So as I mentioned, Nick Welch, so Chief Technology Officer for Viditech. My background is largely in digital strategy and delivery, working across a range of technologies, so web applications, mobile, cloud infrastructure, and increasingly AI, which forms a massive part of our world.
And just to introduce Optima Connect, we're a boutique data specialist consultancy here in Edinburgh. We specialize in building and supporting data platforms for our clients that underpin everything from BI through to analytics, data science, and ever increasingly AI.
Excellent. So just to tell you a little bit about Viditech for those of us who don't know us very well, basically our mission statement is very much about improving people's experience of life and making a positive impact in the world through technology. So that's the lens we look at that in terms of technology implications and the benefits that technology can bring. I think increasingly relevant when we start talking about data and AI, because we very much like to put a human spin on the benefits of the technology. We hear a lot of negative discussions about the complexity of data and the challenges of implementing AI and what that means. But I think, Alan and I would like to add some value to that conversation about how we support businesses and how we support the individual using those tools. A little bit about some of the brands that we work with at Viditech. So we work across a range of sectors. I'd say that one of the key factors there is employing the right technology to be able to deliver a meaningful impact. But that might be mobile applications, it might be web applications, it could be technology platforms, SaaS platforms, infrastructure, it could be AI engineering solutions. So we work across quite a wide range of sectors as well. Some brands like Heineken, a lot of work in the travel, tourism, and leisure sector as well. So working with TUI and Crystal Ski, Glen Eagles as well. We also do a lot of work with enterprise and fintech clients. So we work with St. James Place, the wealth management company, and ACCA, the accountancy standards body.
Thanks, and Optima Connect, similar story. We work across a number of different sectors as well. Our logo's up on the screen, but we do everything from supporting new build projects for new data platforms through to ongoing support for data platforms and getting ongoing value for our clients. Indeed, some of the clients you'll see in front of you there, we've worked with for a number of years. We've got a lot of long-term clients, and we've been helping them evolve their data platforms through from more traditional BI into things that are now doing more data science, machine learning, and artificial intelligence.
So before we get into giving a bit of detail about some of the techniques and the approaches we both use, I think just a little bit to frame the discussion today. We will be talking about AI, we will be talking about data, but I think it's really important to stress that there are massive opportunities with data and what it can do for your business. So we look at some of the quotes that we've got on the page here. McKinsey study into data-driven enterprises, data-driven organizations are 23 times more likely to acquire customers and 19 times more likely to be profitable through use of data. Equally, it's recognised in the UK government data structure strategy, the national data strategy for how we utilise data. It's very much is the lifeblood of the economy in terms of leveraging that data, and AI can play a powerful role in how we do that. But that's all well and good, but it's not really going to deliver for us if we don't have meaningful data strategy in place and data structures. And we did a lot of that at Viditech. We did a lot of AI implementation work for clients. But crucially, where we have a complex data problem, we'll bring in a partner such as Optima Connect to assist us with that and use their expertise to help us define what goods looks like for in terms of the actual data inputs to the platform. So I'll hand over to Alan and he'll walk us through the data foundations and the importance of that as part of your AI project.
Great, and thanks very much, Nick. I'm just going to start off my presentation. Apologies, I've got a slight lag in the slides, which I think is my Wi-Fi, so I hope you could see what I see. Just going to start the presentation with a quote, one I'm sure you're all familiar with. The wise man builds his house upon the rocks. And that kind of summarizes, I think, what I'm talking about today. I'm not necessarily focusing on the house, not focusing on the AI product itself. That's what Nick's for. We're looking at building solid foundations, solid rocks to build our AI platform onto. And that starts with data, starts and ends with data. So I wanted to just quickly do a summary around why AI projects tend to fail. And I'm going to quote here from a piece of research done by the RAND Group, who are a think tank. And they provided a case study by interviewing 65 veteran practitioners and asked them common reasons why AI projects fail. And I'm sure these will be familiar to everyone. But things like having no clear business goals, no end in mind there, not having clear ownership or skills in the organization, not having the right people there to lead the project. No clear path from pilot to production. So got a product that looks great on the developer's laptop, but it's not, there's no clear way of getting that in as a customer product and getting it front facing. Unrealistic and undefined expectations, so perhaps a mismatch between execs' expectations and the reality on the ground. And finally, poor data quality and access, and that's what I'm going to be talking about today. AI products will not succeed in an organization unless they're built on solid data, reliable data, but still not have a good product if you don't have good data beneath it. So what I'm going to do today is just talk about how poor data will manifest itself, problems it'll cause, but then look at how we can go about starting the journey of improving that and building on that solid foundation. So just start off with a kind of quick, kind of hypothetical examples of bad data foundations and how they can affect an AI project. So imagine for a moment we're working with a retail client, and we're building for them an AI product that's going to write commentary on sales performance. So morning trading meeting, people come in and the key people get a summary generated by AI of the sales. But the company we're working with is facing a number of common data quality issues. All the classics, such as incomplete data, so nulls and gaps in the tables. We've got rogue values. So, for example, numbers are coming back as all nines due to a problem upstream, or dates are defaulting to 1901, that kind of thing. Bad data boundaries, so access boundaries. This is becoming a bigger and bigger problem, actually, as AI tools are getting embedded deeper and deeper into servers and data centers. Claude Workspace, for example, when it's installed on a machine, it will actually go looking for databases, looking for pots of data. We've seen examples of this going wrong, where it's actually able to access things like confidential financial information, HR things that you thought were secret. So it's really important when you're installing agents on machines that you give it clear boundaries. And finally, no master data linkage. This is an important one. It's very common for transactional data to use abbreviations or codes for things to save space. So, for example, an airport might use LCY to discuss data. Unless you can link that to the master data definition that says that's London City Airport, you're not going to get very meaningful output in your text. So back to our problem, we're building this AI machine for our retailer. And let's look what happens if we're building it on the bad data. So incomplete data, we get things like congratulations to the null store who got the highest sales yesterday. If we've got things like rogue values appearing, we get some bad outputs, such as Stella Artois sales being up 1 billion% last month. Using the example of no boundaries. So, for example, here the system's also going into the HR logs as well as the sales, and we're getting commentary that the sales were down yesterday, probably because Bob was off sick with diarrhea. Not what we really want to see. It may be right to make a correlation with absence. Maybe Bob's our top salesman, but I'm pretty sure he doesn't want his private HR file being accessed by AI. And finally, the no master data linkage. And this is where abbreviations are coming through. So imagine we're a cleaning company. Imagine we've got a product called assorted cleaning wipes. Probably guess where I'm going with this. Ass wipes were selling like crazy yesterday. So, okay, I'm being a bit flippant here with a bit of a silly example just to demonstrate it, but there is a serious message behind these. If the AI agent's not working properly and if it's accessing bad information, it can have further consequences. To use the example of the Stella Artois again, maybe that 1 billion% is a bit daft, but if it was higher, a more realistic wrong number, this could be automatically ordering stock. It could be issuing commission payments to salespeople and things. If the data it's using is wrong, it can do things that are wrong. And these are the sorts of things a human might pick up on, but an AI agent is a lot less likely to. And that's why it's important to have the right data up front. Okay, so I've focused a little bit on the negatives to set the scene, but I don't want to talk about that. I want to focus on the positives in terms of what we can do to set good data foundations for AI and how you can start it. Give some takeaways from today. So we obviously work with a lot of clients on getting good data foundations. And the good news is none of this is new. It's the same data quality management techniques that have underpinned data platforms for years, the same techniques that were used to get data right for MI, BI, analytics, and beyond. Comes into, I would categorize it as 5 key areas. Master data management I've covered already, but having a single trusted source for things like your product definitions, your calendar, so getting your own financial calendar with a fiscal calendar, making sure there's consistency. Metadata management, and this one's probably more important than ever with AI. It's the data that describes your data. The AI tool will only work if it understands what it's actually looking at. So having data that describes what measures are, what calculations are used is essential, and properly labels data too. You've probably all been in a situation where you've gone into a meeting and two different stakeholders are quoting two different numbers for the same thing. More often than not, they're both right, but they've used slightly different definitions. So having metadata management to record those is essential for your AI tool to work. Data lineage, and it's a key thing to ensure every data platform can do is understand where all the data's come from and what's happened to it along the way. And that's particularly important if you're mulching data from different sources so that you know how it's calculated and you know you're comparing apples with apples. Access boundaries, back to poor Bob and his stomach, making sure your AI machine can only access the data it should. And you should think hard there about PII because that's very important. And also test data, because we've seen a few examples of AI being trained on test systems accidentally, and sometimes data in test systems tends to be fabricated, and it doesn't have some of the nuances real world data will. And finally, data governance, perhaps the most obvious and probably what underpins making the other four happen, but ensuring within the organization you've allocated clear ownership to data, people identified to ensure the health of the data and ensure it's ready, and having the policies and practices in place to make sure that's happening and make sure your data is fit for purpose. So those 5 things there, they're not binary. It's not a case of you either do them or you don't. Companies will start using these 5 things, but you'll get better at them. You'll develop your skills in them over time, and that's called maturity. There are many examples of kind of maturity curves, maturity lines. I'm sure you've seen, but I've put together a very simple kind of 5 point line here. You start at stage 1, where your data is held in spreadsheets in people's heads, pretty much unmanaged, unstructured. As we get better, as we mature, we've got more loose controls around the data. So we have BI that exists, but it tends to be siloed and the output tends to be very reactive. The third point is getting to well-defined data. So when we've got well-defined data, we have a central data platform and we have governance. We've got the startings of definitions and we've got some good quality coming out. But we get better and we get to the point where we're well managed with the data. And that's when the data lineage is understood, the definitions are clear, and crucially, the numbers are trusted. And I always say when we're working with clients, an acid test of a good data platform, when a data platform's hit the success criteria, when it's been accepted, it's when your senior stakeholders trust the numbers in it. So when they come along to a meeting and they see your Power BI dashboard or whatever, and they know it's come from your platform, they know they can trust the numbers and rely on it. And the final stage in an organization is when it's fully optimized, where data is a product that ultimately drives the strategy of the company and pushes it towards success. And it's at that point the data team moved from just being a team that slops out reports and data to being a core part of the business, literally driving strategy and delivering performance for the business rather than being retrospective. Okay, final point. Oh, sorry. I was going to just draw on that diagram. There is a threshold for AI projects, and I think it's somewhere between 3 and 4. Once we start moving from being well defined to well managed with our data, that's the point where we're really ready to start using the data for an AI product. Before you get there, you're likely to have some of the problems we saw before. But once you're in that well managed place, you can almost trust your AI as you would trust a person using the system themselves to get it right. So where to start? What to take away from today? Well, I always say the first thing you need to do is create a data strategy before people go rushing into what tooling to use or what the output's going to look like. Develop a strategy for getting your data right. I could probably do a 3-day course on how to write a data strategy, and I think I'm already out of time, so I'm not going to do that. But I'm just going to very quickly give my 5 key points, key areas that I think should be in a data strategy. And here they are. So first up, start with the problems. What do you need your data for? What problems are you going to solve with your data? So there's no point rushing out and building an expensive Databricks solution for 100 grand a year if you don't actually know what you're going to use it for. 2, review your data landscape. Understand the data you've got, the quality of the data, the governance in place, and the lineage. Prioritize your domains. You don't need to do everything at once. Pick some of the top use cases around your business, pick the key areas of data for those, and get those into a platform and get the data clean and right. Name the owners and build that governance framework from day one. Really important. It's very difficult to retrospectively introduce governance, but when you're starting a new platform, that's the time to do it. And finally, one that's often overlooked in a strategy case is running a proof of concept. I always say most data platforms, most companies building data platforms, we see they tend to start with that end to end, wanting to build the whole enterprise data platform in one go. And that tends to lead to an 18-month, 2-year project where very little is seen of it. And naturally, investors get nervous about what's going to come out. I always recommend doing a proof of concept. Start with a thin slice of data and get that working end to end. Pick one use case for your business or one source of data and do that end to end and get the output. And that gets you the buy-in then. People see what the data platform can do and it'll give you the kudos to build it out and bring in the rest. So that's probably the fastest I've ever described a data strategy, but I hope the 5 points are useful there to take away. And obviously, more than happy to speak to anyone offline if anyone wants to know more or hear more thoughts on that. And that's me. I'll hand back to yourself, Nick, but thanks everyone for listening and be happy to take any questions at the end.
Thanks, Alan. Some very salient points there, and I think fundamental to what we're doing here in terms of, if you're implementing AI, making sure you've got robust data on the back end, and making sure you've got some sound principles governing that. I think one of the things we're looking at here is the value of business data. And, obviously AI can be a powerful enabler in terms of presenting and analyzing that data. And just picking up some of the points here, I won't delve too much on the stats, but as you probably see here, there's a massive opportunity. A lot of organizations are capturing vast swathes of data and not necessarily being able to analyze those effectively due to the breadth of what they have. And equally, they don't always have the data strategy in place to be able to segment and process that data in a structured way to support that. But Alan's always already outlined some of the techniques you can do. So I think what I'd like to do is just talk about the layering of the AI layer across the top of that and some of the benefits and a couple of pointers about how that can be done. The main reason why you would do it really is AI supports your data-driven storytelling. So, with AI, you've got the ability to generate plain text summaries from complex data sets. You've got a lot of friction removed because you can actually use those natural language queries to ask information of the AI and be able to retrieve data. And I think crucially, everybody will come to AI from a slightly different perspective and need. So AI can fundamentally flex. It can give you an executive level summary of what are the key data insights, the high level information you need. But equally, you can do an analyst level deep dive on that data if you need specific information. So I think that's the power that unlocks for you if you're employing an AI layer. Equally, graphing and visualization of data, that's valuable. It's not always going to be an AI approach, but equally, AI can sometimes identify patterns and anomalies and trends in large data sets that can be trickier for a human to be able to see. And I think, equally, that ability to use AI as a summarization tool, we all use it daily in terms of the capability, but it's able to give us some really good takeaways when time is limited. Alan's talked about that data strategy piece in terms of getting your house in order, but I think also what does that result in the front end on AI if you haven't done that? Where are the gotchas and how can you recognize those? I mean, the first element of that, people will be familiar with AI hallucinations. So if you've got insufficient data or you've got ambiguity within your data structure, AI is great at filling the gaps and then talking confidently to you about what it understands, but be very mindful of that. I think one of the ways to avoid that is very much defining your use cases up front and being clear that you're testing against them. Label chaos, we've already heard about some of the challenges around abbreviations. So there's a risk there of AI comprehension of some of your concepts. Make sure you've got a well-defined taxonomy for your data and that you are giving the AI information and context so it understands how to read and understand that data. Again, weak inference is another consequence we see if there are too few training examples. You don't want patterns to be general. You don't want the model to guess. So you need to be quite specific and provide contextual information about the training set you're giving to the AI as well. And again, bias is always a risk. So be mindful of representation gaps. I think there's a really good example of this from a leading cloud provider who put out a enhanced recruitment package using AI to shortlist candidates and inform their AI strategy, their recruitment strategy. They had to basically reverse that because the historical data had a preference towards a male bias in terms of past recruitment for developer roles. And again, that's something that you're using real historical data, but be mindful of how that might be conceived if you're using that as your historical norm. You don't want inference and assumptions about the recruitment profile you're using, for example. So that's a good example of things you need to be conscious of, like silent biases. We've got a couple of points here around implementing data-driven AI solutions. So I'll took a quite high level across these, but essentially choose the right model for the task. There are obviously lots of models out there, including frontier models that offer very strong capabilities, but evaluate those models. Consider a multi-model strategy. I think we've all seen the headlines with Anthropic having to reverse course due to US government export restrictions around their latest models. So consider that you may be in a position where you don't want vendor lock-in. You might need to evaluate multiple models. Consider data sovereignty as well. Where is your data being stored geographically? Are you observing data protection and GDPR requirements properly? Also consider things like zero data retention configuration in platforms like OpenAI and Anthropic, where you have that capability, or you can use Copilot, the Microsoft estate, to add a lot of data governance. Data set, start with a diverse data set, make sure that fully represents your use cases. And if it doesn't, either increase your data set or reduce your use cases, keep it simple. Plan for model drift because the models will advance over time and will be refined. So AI is not a deployment and a one and done to production. You very much need to be testing your use cases ongoing to make sure that you haven't got changes in AI behavior. And again, that human in the loop piece, very critical in terms of planning for those ongoing refinements, checking the model, particularly in high risk use cases. Make sure you're auditing for bias and you've got things like your data governance policy. You're mindful of how your AI is accessing information. You're actually got a good observability of that. Very briefly, opportunities to enrich your data set. So once you've got the basics in place, you're using maybe RAG-based AI to create custom training sets. Think of how you can slowly start to introduce additional data sets. So, can you support API integrations from other systems, like your CMS platform, asset management, learning management platforms? Can you enrich the data experience for your audience? Equally, can you use MCP servers? A great way to give structured and secure access for AIs into other data sets. And again, should be part of your governance model. And we've got some examples of governance policies, but again, data minimization. Treat your AI like you would a member of staff. So least amount of information access required to do the job. You should be auditing, logging. You should be checking PII. You should be regularly auditing the model. And just as Alan said, with a data strategy, you need a governance framework for your AI to make sure that you're approaching it in the right way. We've talked so far about a lot of what sounds like a lot of planning, a lot of rigorous governance, a lot of strategy. That's true, but how do I just get started? You might want to innovate. You want to do something in this space. You absolutely can. And I think, as Alan called out, and I would say this too, the way we work with clients at Viditech, let's start with the proof of concept. Start small, start with a limited data set, test and refine, see how you can use that. And that's where you can apply those governance controls without projects spiraling out of control and involving multiple different stakeholder involvement from across your organization. AI amplifies your data quality. So if you've got glitches in your data, that's going to come through and be magnified. So those are the things you want to be sure about. It's much easier to, on a small proof of concept, manage project governance. Context matters, the information you can slowly, having built that proof of concept, then build on that with additional layers of data. But for me, the human judgment remains absolutely essential in that. We've captured some useful resources. We've presented this in some of our past webinars in our AI Chaos to Clarity series. But I think I'd point people towards some of the regulatory information. So the EU AI Act is a very good guide. Equally, the ICO within the UK has a very good legal framework for data protection and GDPR in relation to AI. There's some very helpful information there that can give you a very good steer. There are also some very well-defined third-party tools on the OWASP list that you can use for security risk mitigations if you are developing this from a software development perspective in-house. So there are a lot of resources you can lean on to make that happen. Thanks. That basically concludes our presentation today, but we'd like to open the floor to some questions if anybody has any. I think we've got one, Alan. Can AI itself fix our data quality problems?
Yeah, that's a really good question, actually, and it's one that comes up a lot. Obviously, I would say the answer to that is yes and no, which is maybe a bit of a cop out. But obviously, there are a number of AI products that do focus on data fixing. So being able to detect anomalies, like bad values and fix nulls and things. So some of the problems I did describe earlier, there are AI solutions to them. But the thing with AI is it doesn't necessarily know what correct looks like for your business. It doesn't know what's right and what's wrong. And there are certain things it will never know. Like it will never know what margin is in your business, like what definition you use to calculate margin. Does it include VAT or not, for example? So there always needs to be a human, a domain expert of your business in there as well. And I think it is also it's a risk function, isn't it? Like governing data. And I always think risk does need a human there to do that. And someone needs to keep an eye on the AI. So yes, you can use AI to an extent to fix your problems, but no, it won't fix all your problems on its own.
I think we've got another one around governance and legal frameworks. I think this actually came from a client asked me this question this morning because he couldn't attend the session today. He's in finance, and I think this is a big concern. Governance and legal frameworks, it's interesting because the UK is in a bit of a grey area. So some of the resources that we indicated on the slide are a good steer. There is regulatory work going on within the UK. So there was a paper put through the House of Lords last summer on this, which unfortunately wasn't effectively passed into law. The short answer is that a lot of that is still to come for the UK. The EU AI Act is a very good steer on that, but the way the UK framework currently operates is effectively they are outsourcing the responsibility for enforcement through to typical UK authorities like the Information Commissioner's Office or the FSA. So they're independently looking at this. So I think we will see later this year a new bit of information on this, but some of the resources we've called out, as well as the UK AI Security Institute, does a lot of work in this space. So we are seeing white papers published in terms of that governance framework for the UK. So we expect a further update in terms of what that will mean for the UK regulation coming through. It's a bit of a shifting space at the moment, though, and not quite firm. I think one other question is just about models being more or less prone to hallucinations. Are we seeing improvements with new releases happening? In short, yes. Um, I think when this was probably more of a factor sort of 18 months ago when I suppose, OpenAI and ChatGPT was more in the forefront of the public consciousness. We do still see those on occasion. I think this is one area where testing and validation comes in because very much sometimes that's about the AI being asked something outside of its training set. And there are very good ways you can frame the user experience to prevent that risk. So, for example, prompt engineering, you can, through certain models, particularly ChatGPT, you can enforce off-topic conversations. So if the AI is asked something outside of its training set, it can respond with a canned response and then refer the user to appropriate guidance if that's elsewhere on your website, for example. So it's quite a good way as part of your testing strategy to consider those sort of edge cases and then to defensively code through them for using prompt engineering. But it is less of a risk, but it still happens. And particularly, I'd say where it does happen, it's mostly where you've got two overlapping sources of data which say broadly similar things. And you might have AI that has challenge in terms of comprehension of the difference. So sometimes it's about giving the AI context or refining the data inputs that go in to inform the AI's understanding. I think broadly that's it. We've come up on time, so I think we'll close today's session. But thank you very much all for your time today. We really appreciate you joining. And if anyone does have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.